All right. Thank you for joining DataStax Summit. We have one of the most interesting sessions of the day focused on cloud costs. Why don't we go around and do some brief intros and then we'll get right into it. Carlos, why don't we start with you?
Of course, thanks, Mike. Hello, everyone. I'm Carlos. I'm based in Porto. I'm the data and analytics hub lead in Porto for Adidas, and I'm also a data engineering director there. Happy to be here and share my opinion on cost management in data stacks. So, thanks a lot for inviting me, and excited for the talk.
Great, Joseph. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone. My name is Joseph Machado. Been in the data space for almost 10 years now. I now work at LinkedIn. Very excited to be here and looking forward to what everyone has to say. And yeah, looking forward to a great talk.
Thank you, Joseph. And Vikas?
Hey, hello everyone. My name is Vikas Ranjan. I have been working in the data space for the last 18 years. In my recent role, I've been working as a senior manager of a data intelligence team at T-Mobile. I am super excited to be part of this STEAM panel, where we'll be talking about some of the best practices and our learnings in FinOps.
And Mike, last but not least.
Thanks for everyone having me. I'm Mike Fuller. I'm a CTO at the FinOps Foundation and co-author of the Cloud FinOps book by O'Reilly. Previously worked for 10 years at Atlassian as a principal engineer. So yeah, super excited to be on the panel.
Great. Thank you all for joining us. And why don't we jump right in? First question, what do you see as the greatest challenge when it comes to controlling costs associated with managing data in the cloud? I feel like we could spend 30 minutes on this one question alone. But Carlos, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think for me, like now we are living in a world where we want to have, at least in my personal opinion, I think we have we want to have a single unified data platform, but that serves multiple teams at the same time within the organization. So we all share a single platform that can scale according to all the analytical workloads. So data science, data analysis, all the machine learning around and so on. But it's really hard to assign compute and storage, individual compute and individual storage to all those team members and those teams spread across different domains while keeping costs in check through central mechanisms. So for me, it's really about striking that good balance between a data mesh implemented in a way that we can have individual compute assigned to teams while also keeping costs in check. Because if we come from a centralized world where everything is driven by a centralized team, then I believe it gets easier to have costs under control. But if we decentralize all of it, even if it is a single platform, we really have to pay attention to the monitoring mechanisms to keep costs in control. But for me, it's really more than just monitoring. It's being proactive. It's about preventing that your bill gets out of control. And of course, when we talk data, we always talk two things: is always storage and cost, and compute. Sorry, and compute is definitely the thing that can probably derail a bit faster. So for me, it's always strike that balance of decentralization while keep costs in check. That for me is the greatest challenge that I believe we have today.
Thank you, Carlos. Joseph, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, my points are similar to Carlos, but not exactly the same. So with all the SaaS tools, like for example, Snowflake, Fivetran, it's very easy to get a stack set up. And so the expectation from management is, oh, we need stuff delivered faster. But it comes at the cost where if you're not intimately familiar with the pricing models, you can kind of cost the company a lot of money. For example, if you're running for a naive example, data quality checks on Snowflake, and you're running them constantly, you're basically doing scans per run, and that can quickly add up. So there needs to be a balance between the speed of delivery and kind of a thoughtful process before kind of this using all the power you have, because that will cost a lot. And the other thing is, especially in startups, when you're moving fast, you don't really build the infrastructure to monitor costs. That can come back to bite you. So kind of having that balance, as Carlos said, is crucial. Monitoring, making sure that your queries are not like running for hours and processing unnecessary amounts of data. You have a wrong filter, one of your analysts can like create a query that costs a lot of money. So just monitoring that, being very mindful of what data, how much compute you expose to the downstream users. There needs to be some sort of process there. More often than not, companies usually spend and then try to cut back, which is the typical move fast mentality. So it's a balance. You also don't want to take forever to build a platform. You want to be able to deliver, but also be mindful of the cost. Yeah.
Thank you, Joseph. That's really interesting. Mike, do you have anything to add as well?
Yeah, I think that it's sort of +1 to what's been said so far, that really the key here is just about being transparent and visibility into the costs. So you can't have some parts of the business being aware of the spend of the data platform, but then other parts, especially those who are consuming it, being unawares of the cost impacts of their decisions. And so it really does being able to like figure out a good way to build that transparency in cost out to the consumers of the platform is really key, and can be challenging depending on how shared the resources are on the data platform itself.
Great, thanks, Mike. Next question, and this is an interesting one because I've heard different perspectives in the debate on who manages this, but I'd love to get your feedback on who in the organization on the team is responsible for cost management. Vikas, let's start with you here.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty interesting and a challenging area nowadays. I think my fellow panelists already talk about some of the challenges. From our journey, what we have seen is essentially when you start a cloud program or a journey, you build a sort of a CCO team, and their primary focus is always about starting doing the POCs, building the foundation, and they're focusing more and more on adoption, right? And then as you start getting more mature, as you go from your crawl into your walk and your run space, this is where you start learning the nuances of the cost. So from what are some of the best practices we have seen in past, we started with the platform team. Platform team was looking at this cost more holistically. Back to what Mike was saying earlier, there was a very little transparency or visibility into the total spend at a line of businesses. So some of the things we are doing or we are seeing where industry is evolving towards in the space of FinOps is, it should be a shared responsibility. It should be a responsibility between the platform team. You should have a responsibility with your business line of businesses, right? And then you need to also take in some cases, bring in your financial organization who's looking at the overall your cost, as well as bring in actors like procurement, who are more of an advisor into this process, not necessarily active, but to me, the active will be your platform team, your data engineering team, or your application teams, and your business teams. To me, those are the critical actors who should be part of this overall visibility and spend and the FinOps.
Thank you, Vikas. Mike, you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I think that effectively, if you work through all of the personas across the business, there's going to be some way or shape or form that they actually impact the management of the cost. So we can start with the business leaders or the product leaders inside the organization. They're really needing to set the direction of where expectations, not mandates, just being able to set what the constraint should be. What are the expectations from the business around the data platform and the features and costs that it has? And then, as Vikas sort of pointed out, you've got your procurement and your finance teams. They're gonna interact with this process, and in order to make sure that there is financials being allocated, that we're picking vendors correctly for the data platform. When you go inside the actual engineering side of the house, you have your architects involved, and they should be architecting for those cost constraints, so that they're not designing a data platform that's beyond the dimensions of expectations that the business has. And then the engineers who are implementing that design and managing and running it every day, effectively are aware of their responsibilities. And if they are offering this data platform out to the rest of the business, they do have that responsibility of helping build in the tools and the metrics in order to get that cost visibility out. And then the consumers of the platform across the organization need to be aware that you can't just consume this thing willy-nilly without thinking about the impacts of what you're doing on the platform itself. And then your FinOps team really is just there, just making sure they're orchestrating and driving this attention and building that culture within the organization. They're not really doing the cost management, like they're really just building all the right tools, all the right reports, getting the right education and training across the business to make sure that all that collaboration is successfully happening within the organization.
Thanks, Mike. So kind of digging a little bit deeper into what you were saying, Mike, and the tools and the process. Next question is just kind of understanding, what tools are out there? What processes are you using and implementing to manage and coordinate and kind of level up with cloud costs? Joseph, why don't we go with you on this one?
Yeah. So when I did the same thing, kind of reporting to different lines of businesses what the cost is, the most simplest step I started was with measuring our warehouse compute costs. So it's basically just looking at some query history, and we'll be able to get those numbers. And one thing we started doing was sending out a report every week, broken down by what team is costing how much. That helped us drive a lot of conversation into, hey, is this necessary, or could we invest more in a certain line of business? Because that, in my opinion, or in my experience, resonated better with the management, because they would be able to easily look at the verticals and say like, hey, this costs this much, but the ROI is not that high, so we might want to go back and things like that. So starting off with the simplest one is just a query to gather cost, basically. And once we have that, then we worked on getting the cost for individual tools we were using. So for example, Fivetran, DBT, things like that, and putting them all together and kind of, again, reporting it. And if this happens after the implementation, especially in startups, then they'll have to decide, hey, is it worth keeping this around, or should we sunset this product, or should we not work with the SaaS vendor anymore? So things of that nature has helped a lot. But basically, it's just like, it could be very simple to begin with, just like a Excel sheet, just showing some charts of, hey, this is how the price has been going up or going down, and here is the benefit of it, if the benefit is actually measurable. So yeah, that helped a lot.
Thanks, Joseph. That's great. And make sure you share that spreadsheet with the business teams and procurement and everyone that Vikas mentioned.
Yeah, it's interesting because we created a dashboard, but no one was looking at it, so we had to start sending emails, Excel sheets, and people started looking at it more. It's kind of an interesting dynamic, but yeah.
Yeah, it is, because different teams communicate in different ways, and you need to make sure that everyone has eyes on the costs, especially for each different tooling and option that's out there. I want to kind of just go around the room, and if you could think of kind of one thing that is the most valuable in thinking about controlling costs, what would you, if you could make one recommendation? So we have thousands of data engineers and data leaders joining this session right now. If you could give them one takeaway, what would that be? What should they be thinking about when they leave this session? Carlos, we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. I think I have a lot of, so I tend to prioritize things when we are building a platform. When I think of it, it's like I try to prioritize it as a first day feature a first month feature, a first year feature, and a second year feature. And when it comes to cost, like if I had to give just one advice, I could give many if we have time, but if I had just one, I would say from day one, when you start your data platform, I would highly advise you to set the hard limits on budget for storage and cost. Set the alarmistic on the percentage of those budgets, and then absolutely cap any team that goes above the budget for compute and storage, and prevent any compute ramping up or any storage rise without checking with the team what's going on, and without making sure that you are not going crazy with the budget that you have for the entire platform. So if I would have to give just one, I would give the highest criticality one for me, which is setting up the hard limits and capping any usage after those hard limits. I think if you want to sleep well at night, those should be the ones you should start with.
That's great. Vikas, your
Yeah,
thoughts?
I think great insight from Carlos. I'll just add one thing on top of what Carlos shared. I think from a engineering teams and from a business teams, we should put cost as a part of your design. Cost should be part of your process. Cost should be part of your intake. I mean, we should not be designing if we don't know what is the cost and what is the potential ROI, right? And that is oftentimes where we see challenges with the cost going above the roof. So you can start with building that cost as a part of your organization culture, as a part of your process culture, right? And then as a part of your design culture. And then you basically provide the transparency from day one, right? Provide the transparency from day one, right? It should not be shy of, hey, I have $1 billion sitting in my bank, you can use it for free, right? Nothing is free. Bring that visibility, bring that awareness, bring that mindset. It's about mindset, right? And then one thing on a technical side, I know you asked one, but I'm going to share that. One thing which we have learned very, very well over this last 4 years in the cloud cost management side is tagging is very, very important. Right? You have tons of lines of businesses using tons of shared services. So put the tags to do the chargeback and the chargeback at a very granular level. Back to the transparency again. So those are the things, 2 things I will actually share. Extremely important and critical.
Great, thank you, Vikas. Joseph, your thoughts here?
Yeah, so +1 to both Carlos and Vikas. Excuse me. And yeah, tags has saved my life a couple of times. So yeah, that's extremely important. I would add monitoring and alerting as part of like your initial pipeline. So for example, you could have something like, hey, a team is approaching 70% of their allocated cost, or your price has your cost for a certain tool has gone up by 50% month over month. What's going on? So those sort of pricing and alerting is critical. Sorry, monitoring and alerting is critical. That helps you catch it before you get billed a high amount. So yeah, I'd add that. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Joseph. And Mike?
Yeah, I think that there's a common thread through what everyone has said around the getting the key metrics in front of people. I think when you get to the cloud bill, it can sometimes be a big data problem in itself, and data teams, particularly, especially when they're connected with analytics teams, can often make some really detailed and pretty and substantial reports when it comes to all of the data that's available to you on billing. And so my advice would really just be making sure that the information you are presenting out across the organization around costs is hitting the right key points and not just a pile of pretty graphs. So you're thinking about every piece of data that you're presenting, every metric, and what is the actual action you're expecting from those metrics. Are it's easy to make a graph that doesn't really tell anyone anything specifically what they should be doing. And so really thinking about, where are you presenting that data? In FinOps, we talk about data in the path of, and so we think about like, where are the users of the platform looking? Do they have operational review dashboards? Can I put my key pieces of information in there? And then when I present that information, will they know what they're meant to be understanding of that data and what to do about it if it's outside of some sort of bound? And so really thinking about having actionable insights at the right places within the organization, so that, coming back to that point about like we built beautiful dashboards but no one was reading them. It's because you're expecting them to go somewhere to get that information. So can we lift that key pieces of information and put it where they're already looking and avoid the uplift of doing extra work?
Great, thanks, Mike. And that's really important, right? Transparency and visibility, especially now in the current economic environment that we're in, and everyone's kind of looking closer at cloud costs. And Vikas, I really appreciate your kind of insights in terms of starting with costs and then building from there. And nothing is free, and it couldn't be any more evident now in what we're seeing in the market. And why don't we just go around and we'll do some closing remarks? Anything you want to add? Something that we came up during the conversation, and then we'll close it out. Carlos, would you like to close this out?
Yeah, sure. So I think that a key takeaway from a personal perspective is, I think we should treat our costs, the cost of our platforms, like we treat our analytical activities. So I think it helps if we divide them in descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics, right? So you first build your bills, build your monitoring, build your descriptive analytics, considering your costs, and you spread that through the organization, taking very useful insights that we share here today. You can also think about the predictive part of it. So try to predict trends and the seasonality on those consumptions, and try to be proactive about it before it happens. And then I think the most difficult part is the prescriptive part. So try to prescribe optimizations to people. So why are they spending so much? Why is a certain team always every week ramping up their compute like crazy? What's happening with their jobs? Can they do it faster on Spark? Can they do something better on Spark? Can they optimize something? And that's probably where you can start baking, the machine learning and the predictive and prescriptive part of it inside your costs as well. And it helps if your platform team also has that data engineering and ML engineering and some data science knowledge with your costs as well. And they treat it as a data product as well. They treat it as something that should be offered to the entire organization. I think that definitely helps, and for me it has been for sure a relevant thing to always consider.
Great, thank you, Carlos. Joseph, any takeaways?
Yeah, I think in my experience, there's always a trade-off between ease of implementation and ease of use and cost. So, for example, everyone can spin up their own every team can spin up their own warehouse and have like powerful features, but it comes at the cost. So making sure everyone knows the trade-offs that they are gonna make is critical. So when you are rolling out a new platform, that needs to be communicated clearly. And also, like just as Carlos said, we need to be collecting metrics about usage. If a team is struggling, we like a platform team will need to step in and help out with, hey, why is this job taking a long time or consuming too many resources? So kind of like training, monitoring and training is what I would say. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Joseph. Vikas, takeaways?
Yeah, I think for me, I think adding to what my fellow analysts have talked earlier, I think for me, it's not once and done. It's a continuous process, right? We need to start with accountability, right? Accountability has to be at all levels of the organization, whether it's a consumer, producer, user, or business community, right? It has to be accountable. Everybody has to take accountability. I think they were talking about application. I call this as we have to always learn to unlearn, right? Cloud is different than on-prem, where you have bought a lot of assets, over-provisioned, and then you never cared about optimal design. I mean, you do, but it changes. Data changes, your application change, your user requirements change. You have to always think about how can you make this design better. So you're having this constant feedback loop of constant looking at a design, looking for opportunities. Another thing I have learned is we need to put more focus on the infrastructure automation. There is tons and tons of waste in cloud. People will do some POC and they'll forget to shut down their infrastructure. People will run a machine learning model and then just never look at that again. Leverage some of those best practices, leverage some of those cost advisory insights coming from the tools, build the infrastructure automation. So if you're not using a service, in some cases, you can automatically shut down the service, right? And then last thing, which as a business leaders, we should always look at is cloud is changing rapidly. We should always go back and look at the different pricing models. Maybe something we bought a year back is not relevant anymore. Go back to your hyperscalers, Don't be shy of asking for some benefits in terms of your investments, right? Leverage those pricing models, look at the different SKUs, make procurement your best friend. Because if procurement is best friend, you're going to always find a way to save money. So I'll say that, again, it all comes down to people, process, technologies. Leverage all those best practices across those.
Yeah, that's great, Vikas. A lot to unpack there. And Mike, do you want to close this out?
Yeah, I think in FinOps, we always talk about the different personas in the org. And I think we really want to emphasize the fact of collaboration here. I didn't think if you go back to your desk and you're thinking, man, we've got this challenge of costs to solve, it's a business problem to be solved. It's a collaborative effort across all of the different personas. And, if you look at each individual persona, they've got a different goal in mind for the organization, the different interest area. But if you sort of put all those things together and look at them collectively, you have one major interest in mind, and that's the success of the organization. So I think, and that's when you start to balance that good, fast, and cheap, right? How awesome features and performance and size of the platform do we want to have that has these benefits to the business? And so collectively, all personas need to get involved. They need to understand the trade-offs that are being made, and we need to be making these decisions, not just once off at the beginning of building a platform, but just constantly throughout the process of managing a platform, making the cost trade-offs and that business value trade-offs across with all the different personas involved.
Great. Thanks, Mike. That's some great feedback. It's certainly a team effort. So, all right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. And until next time.
Thank you.